what's the fourth page of the mimer? 1, 2, 3, fourth page of the mimer is Gimel. I'm not sure exactly the number again, the page, because I think the sefer that I'm learning out of at the moment is a different sefer than what I printed out. But anyway, be that as it may, we were talking about in Bekosek Leichu, that we're talking about Shatiu Amelin B'Torah, and it's talking about mitzvahs and Torah in a over-the-top type of fashion. And because of that, the brachas are in such a way that it's an over-the-top type of brachas, chitim kekloyos, that will come down on Wednesday night and on a Friday night. And therefore, if it's such amazing brachas, so why do we say that the rewards are physical rewards? If it's such amazing brachas, then the rewards should not be physical. They should be spiritual rewards and so on. And maybe at least mention something about the spiritual rewards. He doesn't mention. And we asked about specifically what is this idea about a meilim b'Torah, that even though in Kriyas Shema we say v'hayim shema tishmo, we don't say that you have to be a meilim b'Torah to be able to have an asat mitar arts can be itoy. But when it comes to the brachas and parshas B'chokosai, over there it says shetiu amelum b'Torah. So why is it necessary? The idea of amol Torah, the idea of toiling in Torah, and what is this idea of toiling in Torah, and so on. Now we wanted a whole thing about which is greater, Parnasa or Geula. We said there's a medrash that says that Geula is less than Parnasa, because Parnasa says that Hashem himself will do it. Geula says that a Malach will do it, and that's a Tzedek's acts on that. How could that be? There's a Parnasa has to do with Tishrei. Geula has to do with the month of Geula of Nisan. Nisan is so much higher than Tishrei. Nisan is beyond the world to such a degree that when it comes to Anoich Hashem Elokecha, comes to Aseres Adibros, we introduce it through Anoich Hashem Elokecha Shesicha Meretz Mitzrayim. I took you along out of Eretz Mitzrayim, not that I created the heavens and the earth. That's so much higher. To introduce an idea that there are two types of Parnasa, and that's the difference if Parnasa is higher than Geula or not. One level of Parnasa is where it's like Hashem sends a shliach. It says to the rest of the world, the Eibishter sends a shliach to give rain, and rain and Parnasa is identical. So it says Nosati Yishmechem B'itam. It's also the general idea of Parnasa, because Parnasa, especially in Eretz Yisrael, was through rain and agriculture. So the rest of the world gets through a shliach the rain. Therefore, the Parnasa comes through a shliach. But in Eretz Yisrael, it comes through Hashem himself. Hashem himself is the one that sends the Parnasa in Eretz Yisrael, the rains in Eretz Yisrael, and that is hinted in the word v'nasati motor, v'nasati. I'm sorry. Anyway, and v'nasati gishmechem b'iton. I will give. It's going on the Eibishter himself, the level of Anochi Misha Anochi. That shows on the level that's higher than say the Ishtalshalos, and that's the idea that he says that this is also has to do with the levels of Yichud, the Yichudim L'mayla. That we know that all the Hamshakas come through the Yichudim above. There is Yichud Zun and Yichud Ava, Yichud Chachma Bina, but in Yichud Chachma Bina itself, which precedes the Yichud Zun, there could be a Yichud Chitzoni, and that's like the Parnasa that goes to the whole world. That's not Ani. But the Yichud Chachma Bina, that's a pneumistic Yichud, really to be able to make a pneumistic Yichud that comes from a much higher Shodesh. That's the level, like we said, Keser, the level of Anochi, Mishra Anochi, etc. That is the level of Parnasa that's higher than the Geula. So now we're going to bring this in further in the Mimer. Again, Ois Gimel, the fourth page of the Mimer. Amram, Kadeshati Am Shachs of Parnasa, Mchinas Shalom Mail, Meseder Ishtal, so at this level of Parnasa, we said it's the highest level of Parnasa, the level that comes higher than Seder Ishtalshel. So we say, I will give you rains. For that, there has to be the special avoid of our parsha. That our parsha says that you will go in my chukim, that you will be toiling in Torah specifically in a way of toil and effort. That is what brings down this higher level of parnasa, not the lower level of parnasa that comes from chitzonius, chachma, bina, and so on. Yes, we need a preface first where it says in the Hemshech of Amarim known as Tafri Samach Vav, from the year Tafri Samach Vav, L'chura, in a move on. Seemingly, it's not understood. Mashakasov im b'chayste leichum, nasati gishmechem beitam, v'nas nahart yivula, v'eitz asada, and the tree of the field will give its fruits. The Rebbe Rashab over in Samach Vav goes on to ask further. Mashakasov v'hayim shemaya tishmu gaimer, nasat mitar artzkam gaimer. Also, what it says, if you will listen, then also I will give you the rain of your land. So the question that the Maimon Samach Vav asks is seemingly, why do we need to have a special promise? This was already something that Hashem already assured that the world will go on as normal, as it's supposed to be. After the Mabul, during the Mabul, it says that the whole entire normal running of the world, the seasons and planting and plowing and sowing, all this stuff stopped. So therefore, afterwards, Abishter made a bris. He made a covenant. He promised Noach, we're not going to do that anymore. The world is going to run like normal. So that's what Rebbe Rashab asks. Fourth line in, already made a covenant, a promise that Hashem made during the times of the Mabul, meaning after the Mabul, in the vision that he showed him, the rainbow. And he said, but you see, that Hashem said that when I see the rainbow, I will remember it for an everlasting promise, meaning that what will he remember to ensure that he doesn't stop the natural running of the world? There'll be an ongoing hashpah, there will be a non-ceasing hashpah and flow of energy to the world, and all the world. And that's what it says also over there in the Parshas Noach. Additionally, all the days of the earth, planting and harvesting, goimer kites, of summer and winter, the young island, day and night, they will not cease. So the Rebbe right away says in the parentheses, all this entire promise also includes the idea of Hashem making it rain. It says in the parentheses that this also includes what we say in Krishma, that I will give you the rain of your land. You will gather your grain and your wine and your oil. So if that's the case, so the Rebbe Rashab asks, it's impossible for this promise to ever cease. Even if Chas v'Sholom, Yidden would not fulfill the mitzvahs. So therefore, the question is, how in our parsha and also in Krishma does he link the rains coming down to our fulfillment of the mitzvahs? Why does he say, if you will go in my statutes, if you will go and do the Torah mitzvahs, so then we will have Yishmeichem, then we will have Masad Mitar Artzchem. So the Rebbe explains, the Rebbe Rashab also explains, the idea behind this is the Zevadai, surely there has to be the existence of the world because of the covenant being made. We still need, even though Hashem promised Noach, we still need fulfillment of mitzvahs. How come? What would be lacking? Chas v'Sholom, if there would be no mitzvahs, what would be missing? Because the promise and the covenant they made, from that only comes down that life force, that vitality and existence of the world, according to the measure that was set, the way it was already established and set in the chain order of the sun. So as much as it was decided, as much as already apportioned, as much as it was already in the system that should be the Hamshacha, that is what comes down. Nothing more if there's no Torah mitzvahs. Avai de Kiyum Torah mitzvahs, but through fulfilling Torah mitzvahs, Yom Shachar Chodesh B'Tesefs Meruba comes down a new light in addition Meruba ala Iker, more than the primary, more than the standard Hamshach Shekvar Husad al Pi Seder Ishtalshus that was already established according to Seder Ishtalshus. Here, actually, we see a new insight or a better insight into what it says, that Birchasish al Kodesh Baruch Hu Tesfasim Meruba ala Iker. The bracha of Hashem, its addition is more than the primary. Meaning, normally, when a person gives, there's what he gives primarily, and then there's what he gives in addition to. Let's say an employer gives an employee a salary. So the salary is the main thing, and the addition, let's say a bonus for Yom Tov, a bonus for something else, that is less than the main salary. By Hashem, it's not that way. The main thing is less than what Hashem adds. Where do we see it? We see this exactly what we're talking about over here. That when there is no Torah mitzvahs chas v'sholom, because of the promise that Hashem made to Noach, so there's the primary core established amount, how much it's necessary to keep the lights on, to keep the world running, to keep the everything in Seder Ishtalshus going on. But when we do Torah mitzvahs, we draw down from such a high level, a level that's way beyond Seder Ishtalshus, similar to what we said before about Parnasa coming from Anoichi and so on. And that, the Ohr Nisav, that Ohr Chadash, is something that's way beyond that core amount that normally comes down. And then the Rebbe adds now another thing. One answer, or one component of the answer is that Torah mitzvahs gives us more than just the basic subsistence level. Now the Rebbe is going to add that even for the basic subsistence level, there's also a need for Torah mitzvahs, even though he already promised to Noach that the world will not stop running. Even for drawing down the life force, vitality, and the existence of the world, even the way it was already established in Seder Ishtalshus, there is still a need for the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. So he says as follows: there is two ways how Hashem gives us our chayes. There is the free way, without earning it, and then what we earn. So it's not just what we said before, that if we earn it, it's more. But also there's a different system in place, the way things are running initially, and then the way things are running once the Eibishter gave us the Torah, the system is now different. No freebies. We need to earn our keep. So he says, also that which came down at the beginning of creation, because Hashem desired kindness. So even though the beginning of creation, let's say even before Noah, the fact that Hashem made and created the world, and he made it rain, and he made the plants grow, etc., until Noah's times, no one earned that. There was nothing to earn that Hamshacha. That came because of Hashem's kindness. But contrast that with what happened after Matan Torah. In the Achshav now, meaning post Matan Torah, now it comes down only by the inspiration down here below. We need to do something to draw it down through Yidden, doing the avoidance, the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. That is the new thing that came about by the giving of the Torah. That all matters need to be specifically through service. We need to earn it. And then the Rebbe adds another thing. This issue about earning is specific and unique to Am Yisrael as opposed to the rest of the nations of the world. Kunsamayim, especially according to what's explained in Kunsamayim from the Rebbe Rashab. Shamshach is a chayes of Bnei Yisrael, Yichel Liyisirach. I did Kima Torah mitzvahs dafke that coming down, drawing down life force and vitality to the Yid can only come down through the channel and through this Rustol Sat of our fulfilling Torah mitzvahs, and therefore we can understand, based on all of this, why we link the rains coming down with our doing Torah mitzvahs. That's what it says. It'll be if you will listen. Will place you, give you the rains of your land. If you'll go in my laws, so then I will give you the rains in their time. This means also the idea of rains and making a living totally became a Torah mitzvahs is dependent specifically on fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. So this is all essentially an elaboration on a new idea, a new question that he brought here from Samach Vav. Why Bechlal do we link the rain and the parnasa with Torah mitzvahs when this was already promised to Noah? We haven't yet gotten really back to the previous topics about parnasa and geula. That's going to be the next paragraph. Any questions before we go on to the next paragraph? Okay, bottom of the page, 2 lines in the bottom. This itself, that we're saying that now, after Matan Torah, specifically by the Yidden, it's dependent upon Torah mitzvahs. So the way it's dependent upon Torah mitzvahs, there's 2 ways. And that's the difference between our parsha, in B'chleis Telech, V'nasad Yishmechem B'itam, versus what it says in Krishma, V'haim Shmai Tishmu Al Mitzvahisa. It's dependent on the type of avodah we do in Torah mitzvahs that are referred to in these 2 different places in the Torah. The idea behind this is the second parsha of Krishma, it says, top of the 5th page, it'll be when you will listen. And then it goes on and says, you will serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. It doesn't say, like we also mentioned the previous Maimer, many other occasions, that says it in the first part of Krishma. In the B'chol Moedecha, it's not mentioned, the idea of with all your might. And concerning this lack and this leaving out of the word B'chol Moedecha, concerning this, the Chazal said, the Yidden are considered not doing the will of the Eibishter. That's the difference the Chazal says before the first part of Krishma and the second part of Krishma. First part of Krishma, they're doing the will of the Eibishter. Second part, they're not. The simple meaning is, the first part doesn't talk about anybody doing anything wrong. The second part says about if Chashon, people will turn away. But Chassidus explains, no, even in the positive part, it's also called Ein Oisen Ritzayin Shel Makim. Why? Because Avshal learned in Torah Mekayim Mitzvahs, though in the beginning, even of the parsha of Shni of Krishma, they're studying Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs. Kivin Sha'avoida Ein El the Vagbala, since the avoida is only in a measured and bounded way, like we spoke about also in the previous mimer, that the Cholavav Chol Nafshka means with the 10 Chachsan Nefesh, which means that it's a limited type of avoida. But Loi B'chol Moedecha, it's not with all your might, which shows on a level of avoidam that's unlimited, like we know the whole time, because it says ma'od means bli gvul. So therefore, even though we're doing Torah mitzvahs, and therefore we are entitled, based on the system set up, especially since Matan Torah, we are entitled and we have earned our keep, and we have earned the level of parnasa. Still in all, in this avoida, which is our limited avoida, since we are approaching it in a limited fashion, so therefore, and this is similar to what we had in the previous mimer, therefore the hamshacha also comes down in a limited fashion, just away from Seder Ishtal. This is the external union of Chachma Bina, not the inner union. K'dei lahamshich inyan haparnasa m'chinas shel hamaylim b'seder ishtalshlos, able to draw down the idea of making a living of parnasa from a level that's higher than say the ishtalshlos m'chinas yichud primi, an inner union that we said that the inner joining, the inner union of Chachma Bina really draws down from even higher than Chachma Bina, because to have that true union with Chachma Bina, you need to have the input of something higher than that. To such a degree that not only do we get from the inner union of Chachma Bina, and by extension we get from higher than Chachma Bina, but we get all the way from the level of Hashem's essence. This, there has to be the avoid in fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs in such a way as beyond measure and boundary. So, that's the idea of with all your might, beyond the limitations of the powers of the soul that we said. That's called. And we're talking about beyond the limitations of the koiches of the soul, hein koiches premium, ve'hein koiches makif. Both the inner soul powers, meaning the eser koiches and nefesh, and also there's the limitations of the soul in the transcendent, the encompassing soul powers, the level of rotzen and tainug, whatever, but it's still a certain amount of limitation. The chol moedach is beyond even those infinite or those transcendent soul powers. The Indians this idea of b'chol moedecha is with davening. That's the ultimate state of davening, to have it with all your might going out of your agbola. But it's not just limited to davening. In Torah study, where do you find b'chol moedecha? So he says, that's when a person toils in Torah. So since he's toiling in Torah, not just stam learning Torah, like we were asking at the beginning of the Maimer, what's wrong with just learning Torah alone? Why does it have to be the toiling of Torah? So, because here we're talking about drawing down a level of parnasa that's higher than Seder Ishtalshus. To be able to draw down a level of parnasa that's higher than Seder Ishtalshus, all the way to the level of Hashem's essence, we need to go totally out of ourselves. What is that in Torah? That's the level of Amal Torah. That's a level of toiling in Torah. I believe we'll go through this. We draw down from the unbounded level, from the infinite level. Like it's explained in many Amarim in the Hemshech of Tavrish Samach Vav. In Tavrish Samach Vav, there is a Maimer that we were referring to before. And in that Maimer, it mentions this as well, how the toiling of Torah is necessary to be able to bring out the highest levels. So it explains in many Torah the great advantage and quality of toiling in Torah. According to what the Zohar states, that he will do to those that await for him or await him. So the Zohar over there explains actually that this actually hints at something very deep. Those that put in, they push themselves, they are doichit, they are putting a lot of effort in matters of Torah, they will get the high level of Yasalam Mechakaloy. So we see this idea of duchke de chachmasa, the idea of yigia and amal and Torah, that is what causes the drawing down of the highest, most level. Yesh lahaisiv, the Rebbe says we can add, in addition to what he's bringing before from other mamarim, the advantage of toil and effort in the study of Torah. That through that we draw down the infinite and unbounded level of Hashem. This is also hinted in the previous Maimer Chazal that we mentioned before about the toil of Torah, that the Chazal say, Kol Adam la'amal nivra. Every person was born for toiling. And now, like it says, Ki Adam la'amal yivoli, that a person was born to toil. Kanal Sifal, like we learned in the first place of the Maimer. What does this mean? What do we see about this? we connect the idea of Amal Torah specifically with the idea of birth. La Amal Yula. He was born to toil. But the Indian Haledu, Yesh Ma'ayin Mamish, the idea of birth is like a total creation of something from nothing. This creation, this idea of birth, the power of procreation is something that is only by the power of the infinite. The very essence of the emanator, that his very being is from himself. He doesn't come from anything else. Only he has the capability to create something from total nothingness without any prior cause to this yesh. So therefore, I like to explain that length in the Hemshech of Samach to Samach Tafresh Zayin. She'inyan al-Leida, who is Gal's Koyach Ein Sof Lamata. The idea of birth is the revelation of the power of the Ein Sof down here below. So you have two reasons in a way. He doesn't really divide it that way, but 2 points why it's a connection with the Ein Sof. First of all is because birth is like Yesh Ma'ayin. And we know that the power of Yesh Ma'ayin is something that's only connected with Hashem's essence, because since he truly comes from nothing, so he can make something that can look like it comes from nothing. And in Hemshech, Samach to Samach, it mentions the thing that I said in passing before, that the power of procreation is an infinite power. The fact that when a person gives birth, then that person can give birth, and then that person can give birth, and so on and so forth. So it's the power of the infinite. So there's a manifestation of the Ein Sof in the power of birth. So that's why he says, La'amal Yulad. He connects toiling in Torah with the idea of birth, because both of them, birth indicates the Amshach of the Ein Sof, the Amshach of Hashem's very essence, and toiling in Torah as opposed to just Torah study, Limud Torah, Eiska Torah, like you mentioned before, the different Lashonos, that is not going to draw down the Ein Sof. It's only the toiling in Torah, the pressure, the yigiyah that brings it out, because then the person is going outside of himself, breaking out of his own boundaries, so he draws down from a level that's beyond bound. So that's what it says. Rashi explains on the pasuk, if you will go on my chuk, that you will toil in Torah, Torah studies in such a way that's beyond measure and boundary. Moving for this understood, that also the way that we told the mitzvahs is beyond measure and boundary, because one leads to the other. If you say and then that means that one corresponds to the other, and that leads to mitzvahs. So if you're doing it in the way of amelim b'toyda, going out of bounds, so the mitzvahs as well is out of bounds. It says you will observe my mitzvahs and you will do them. What is it? Why does it say observe and do them? What's the two thing? You'll do the mitzvahs, finish. Not just the action of the mitzvahs in actuality that you will do them. It's also talking about the observing of the mitzvahs, is also hinting at the person's thought as his intention, fulfilling it out of love, fulfilling it out of awe. Like the Alter Rebbe explained, that what does it mean that a good thought Hashem combines it and adds it to action? Because sometimes the thought and the action can be separate from each other, and that's when my heart is not filled with love. Love is in my mind and in my brain. So then Hashem needs to connect that love that's in my brain or concealed in my heart to actually manifest itself in action. It's going on the awe and love it's called in the understanding of his brain and the concealment of his heart. Top of the next page, the levels rose up higher and higher from the level of action. But even though they're much higher than action, they're removed from the world of action, But it said Machshava Tova Kodesh Baruch Hu Mitzar Falamaisa. He combines it. Shalash Kodesh Baruch Hu Mitzar from the Mechaber and the Bechinas Amaisa. The Eibishter connects them and joins them to the level of action. So that's what it says. That the mitzvahs have in them also the higher level of love and awe. In other words, the mitzvahs are not just done by rote, but they're going totally out of bounds. Because when the avoid is in such a manner. Drawing down of making a living is from a level that's beyond measure and boundary of the chain order of descent. That's where it says, if you will go in my statutes, and I will give you the reins, specifically, I will give, as we mentioned before, not through a messenger, not through a malach, etc. Then when it's totally going out of bounds, it's saying, I am the one who's giving. That manifests itself down here in a bracha that's over the top. Therefore, the way it comes down here below is in such a way beyond the limitations of nature. That's the idea that we said yesterday, that the wheat will be as fat as kidneys. And also barren trees will give fruit. That's so much more than just the bracha and v'hayim shumay tishmu. That is the regular, ordinary type of bracha of Seder Ishtalshlus. This, because the person is toiling in Torah and going higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, it reaches much, much higher, and it impacts in the world in a way of breaking out of bounds, just like the person broke out of bounds and he tapped into the level of out of bounds of Elokus. The brachas down here are out of limitations as well. Any questions?